Okay, remember that they're changing my voice. This video is about Deuteronomy part 3, and I've already proven definitively that the Jews are not chosen. I've proven definitively that I'm right about how the Bible ends. After my flesh dies, people are sealed in hell. We have a lot of verses to go through here, so let's get into this. So in verse 35, the Lord will afflict your knees and legs with painful boils that cannot be cured, spreading from the soles of your feet to the top of your head. So these are the sores in Revelation being mentioned here again. The Lord will drive you and the king who set over you to a nation unknown to you or your ancestors. There you will worship other gods, gods of wood and stone. And this connects to Isaiah 30, right? An abundance of wood is laid out. The wood represents the idol, so does the stone, right? Being stoned to death, the stones of the temple, okay, the cornerstone. There's a lot of connections there. The stones of the altar has to do with their idolatrous, them worshiping idols and how it causes them to burn in hell to the degree that they've sinned against God. So what group you're in is a part of it, and what you do as an individual is a huge part. You will become a thing of horror, a byword, an object of ridicule among all the peoples where the Lord will drive you. You will sow much seed in the field, but you will harvest little, because locusts will eat them. Going back to the locusts in Revelation, right? You have the trumpets and the bowls, and you have the locusts devouring their life worth. You will plant vineyards and cultivate them, but you will not drink the wine or gather the grapes, because worms will eat them. You will have olive trees throughout your country, but you will not use the oil, because the olives will drop off. This goes back to the Mount of Olives. See, it's figurative, right? They're not going to use the oil because the olives will drop off. This goes back to, you don't pick, grapes and figs from thistles or thorn bushes, right? So you're not looking for the physical and literal olive tree. You're looking for the idea of what it's superimposed on, right? The idea of well-being, the idea of anointment, what have you, right? It says you will not use the oil specifically. You will have sons and daughters, but you will not keep them, because they will go into captivity. Swarms of locusts will take over all the trees and the crops of your land. The foreigners who reside among you will rise above you, higher and higher, but you will sink lower and lower. Again, so see, I'm the top martial arts, keyword top, okay? And they're sinking lower and lower as they're resorting to cheating me. And that goes for the Jew and Gentile, like everyone outside the divine order, right? They're sinking lower and lower. They're going down more and more into the realm of the dead, and there's no way back after my flesh dies. It's pretty straightforward. They will lend to you, but you will not lend to them. Going back to riches in heaven, right? You need to go to me, right? And not to yourselves for the gate, right? And you need to buy from me, figuratively speaking, okay, the things that you need, right? The fruit, the oil, the things that you need to get into heaven. So it means you need to dedicate yourself to obeying God through me. They will be the head, but you will be the tail. All these curses will come on you. They will pursue you and overtake you until you are destroyed. So notice it says they will pursue you and overtake you until you are destroyed. That's it, right? They'll be beaten to dust and be scattered amongst the other peoples, never to be reformed again. Pretty straightforward, because it's the day of the Lord. It's the ending. Because you did not obey the Lord your God and observe the commands and decrees he gave you. They will be a sign and a wonder to you and your ancestors forever. Key word, forever, right? Because they're burning in hell forever. Because you did not serve the Lord your God joyfully and gladly in the time of prosperity. Therefore, in hunger and thirst and nakedness and dire poverty, you will serve the enemies the Lord sends amongst you. He will put an iron yoke on your neck until he has destroyed you. The Lord will bring a nation against you from far away, from the ends of the earth, like an eagle swooping down, a nation whose language you do not understand. A fierce-looking nation without respect for the old or pity for the young. They will devour the young of your livestock and the crops of your land until you are destroyed. They will leave you no grain, new wine, or olive oil, nor any calves of your herds or lambs of your flocks until you are ruined. Okay, destroyed, ruined, right? Completion, right? The number 7 for completion, right? They're fleeing away in the number 7, the number of completion. 7 abominations fill the hearts. the heart of the sinner, what have you. You said in Proverbs. They will lay siege to all the cities throughout your land until the high fortified walls in which you trust fall down. They will besiege all the cities throughout the land the Lord your God is giving you. Because of the suffering your enemy will inflict on you during the siege, you will eat the fruit of the womb, the flesh of your sons and daughters the Lord your God has given you. Remember earlier on I said that the fruit of the womb stands for their children. Here you see that they're doubling down. He says the fruit of the womb, yes, it refers to the flesh, right? The presence, right? The bread of the presence of your son and daughter, right? Christ, Christ am the bread of God, right? The presence of God. And the wine, right? The cause and the spirit of God. Okay, and so that is going to be missing until you have no life worth at all, right? Until you're destroyed, until you're ruined, until there's no way back, what have you. And these people are eating the flesh of their offspring. They're dooming them. They're giving their offspring no way back, right? The word springs and offspring are connected, right? So the springs, the waters turn into blood, like blood of a dead person. Their offspring are the walking dead with no way back, right? Behold, a pale horse, and on him sat death, and hell followed with him. They're transforming the planet into the realm of the dead with no gate, with no exit. And of course, it's the top layer. When their flesh dies, they get marshaled to the essence of eternal punishment and disgrace, what have you. Even the most sensitive and gentle man among you will have no compassion on his own brother, or the wife he loves, or his surviving children. And he will not give to one of them any of the flesh of his children that he is eating. It will be all he has left because of the suffering your enemy will inflict on you during the siege of all your cities. So this one's a little bit more complicated to understand, right? So he's eating the flesh, the presence of his children, and he can't really share it with his family member, his brothers figuratively or literally, right? So the flesh is dwindling down less and less, right? So it's saying that the presence of their children are less and less as time goes on. They become more and more like walking zombies, like hooked to a machine. They're not able to walk in the way of righteousness along the path of justice, which is how wisdom travels. From the mouth of the righteous comes the fruit of wisdom, right? So they don't have the fruit of wisdom in their family lines, in the fruit of their womb, what have you. Okay. The most gentle and sensitive woman among you, so sensitive and gentle that she would not venture to touch the ground with the sole of her foot. More, the word being used here is soul, like the soul, the skywalker, right? The sky becomes bronze, and the earth becomes iron. So the skywalker, right? Christ's his feet are like bronze, right? So my feet are bronze, figuratively speaking, trampling the sole of my foot, trampling their souls, right? The wine press, trampling the wine press, right? The fruit being trampled. Okay, the fruit of the womb, the fruit of their actions, the fruit of their family labor, their generational labor, their nation's labor, their churches, mosques, synagogues, you name it. She will begrudge the husband she loves and her own son or daughter, the afterbirth from her womb and the children she bears, for in her dire need she intends to eat them secretly, because of the suffering your enemy will inflict on you during the siege of your cities. If you do not carefully follow all the words of this law which are written in this book, and do not revere this glorious and awesome name, the Lord your God, the Lord will send fearful plagues on you and your descendants, harsh and prolonged disasters, and severe and lingering illnesses. He will bring on you all the diseases of Egypt that you dreaded, and they will cling to you, right? So these are spiritual plagues. Hey, God doesn't merely bring plagues. People die of plagues all the time. Bubonic plague, coronavirus, all throughout history. That's not the day of the Lord. The day of the Lord are spiritual plagues that are really clinging to you and your offspring with no way back. Right? The 7 seals, sealed in hell. We said in Zechariah, where the woman in the basket is Babylon, is wickedness, and she's sealed in, right? That's symbolic of the fate of those who are still around, instead of obeying God to me and being gathered in the clouds, which are the spirit of God's strikes. Okay, the spirit of God's spirit, it's God's spirit, it's his warrior spirit, it's the storm of the Lord, the vengeance of the Lord, the wrath of the Lord, what have you. The Lord will also bring on you every kind of sickness and disaster not recorded in this book of the law until you are destroyed. Again, it says until you are destroyed. You who are as numerous as the stars in the sky will be left but few in number, right? All the stars fall from the sky like figs falling from a tree is what it says in Revelation. Because you did not obey the Lord your God. Just as it pleased the Lord to make you prosper and increase in number, so it will please him to ruin and destroy you. You will be uprooted from the land you are entering to possess, right? So you see how instead of them getting the promised land and ruling, like a lot of people like to pretend that they will, okay, they're uprooted, right? They're out of there. And they talk about the land in the spiritual realm, not just what's left of this world. This world is like a place where people get trampled, especially if they're dumb enough to keep reproducing. So their offspring, depending on how dumb they were, is how much their offspring will reproduce, right? And that will reflect their failure as they're cooking forever in the afterlife. Okay, so for example, as they're burning in the burning lake of sulfur, figuratively speaking, in the afterlife, they're seeing that same kind of lake burning the souls of their offspring that are reproducing on this planet. And then when their offspring flesh is removed and their souls are marshaled into burning into the lake of sulfur with them, they're seeing their offspring as well, cooking as well. And hopefully they were smart enough to tell them to stop reproducing. I keep telling people, stop reproducing. This must be true. This is the most obvious thing in the world. This must be what's going on. There's no other way to look at it. That's why it's coded in here, because they knew that if you understand this, you don't make the wrong decision. There's people who kind of understand it, they've decoded it to a large degree, but they don't truly grasp why it must be true. They know if you truly grasp it, so they try to blind them by making it so that they coded it in there, so it took them a while to decode it, and by then they're used to being some kind of punk for the state or whatever. Okay. Then the Lord will scatter you among all nations, from one end of the earth to the other. There you will worship other gods, gods of wood and stone, which neither you nor your ancestors have known. Again, it goes back to Zeus and Baal and how they change form over time, so they don't know. Their ancestors and these people don't really know these deities. These are deities that are changing, and they're changing because God kind of controls the wicked, like you see in Ezekiel. He speaks to them through the false prophets and leads them astray, right? It says in Isaiah 30, a bit in the mouths of the nations that leads them astray. Among those nations you will find no repose, no resting place for the sole of your foot. There the Lord will give you an anxious mind, eyes weary with longing, and a despairing heart. So they have an anxious mind, right? They're mad, right? They're mad with terror. They're spiritually blind. They're confused. They're anxious, right? And even if they do things to address it, it doesn't help. It's like they're on fire, and they say, here, take a painkiller, right? Maybe they stop feeling pain, but the effects of that fire burning, right, it still continues, and the effects of the fire of God burning their souls keep continuing. So they're just driving themselves insane more and more, trying to deal with it, and they're becoming more and more of a failure in reality, and their ancestors, while they're cooking, see them feeling more and more and on their way to join them. You will live in constant suspense, filled with dread, both night and day, never sure of your life, right? So they're never sure, again, never sure in reality, right? They might be hacking their brains or taking drugs or getting drunk all the time and think that they're sure, but that's the fate of an idiot, right? Because they're missing the true point of life and they're going to hell. And God considered everything they could possibly do before they tried to do it. There's no insight or no plan that can succeed against the Lord and that can ward these punishments. In the morning you will say, if only it were evening. And in the evening you will say, if only it were morning, because of the terror that will fill your hearts and the sights that your eyes will see. Okay, so what they're saying, say they hook themselves to a machine and they feel giddy all the time and they drink wine all the time, expensive wine, right? Their soul is actually saying that they wish that they were doing God's work, right? That's what it's saying. They don't necessarily think that to themselves because they're drunk, because their brains are hacked. The Lord will send you back in ships to Egypt on a journey I said you should never make again. There you will offer yourselves for sale to your enemies as male and female slaves, but no one will buy you. So it's saying that they're going to end up going back to the gods of Egypt that oppressed them in the first place. Remember, I said Set. Many of my videos I've said Set is the counterpart of Baal. He's the counterpart of Zeus. He's the counterpart of Jupiter, right? So as they worship the Baals, Baal is like a globalist deity, a dealer of sailors, right? Globalism, right? Merchants, okay? And even people who say they're nationalists, they're really globalists, okay? And so they return to that captivity in a different form. So in other words, if you're being oppressed by Baal in Egypt and you flee and you go to Greece, you're being oppressed by Zeus in Greece, and you flee and you go to Rome, you're being oppressed by Jupiter. If you flee and go to America, you're being oppressed by, Set, Zeus, Jupiter, all these things together under the guise of the churches or whatever. Okay, so no matter where they go and where they get scattered to, they're worshiping gods of wood and stone, right? Gods that aren't gods at all, that are oppressing them. That God put them there as a trap. See, God put the demons there to trap people who are dumb enough to rebel against him. And you say, how do you rebel against him? By rebelling against God's order. Because when you don't obey God through me, you're calling God a liar. Because God, by his actions, said, this is my son, obey God through him. Okay? And you're saying, well, I'd rather go follow these guys over here, or I'd rather be a Muslim, I'd rather be a Jew or a Christian. And you're not coming into the Royal African Falcon martial art order. Instead, you're falling into this game of the flesh, of race, of labels, right? You say, I trust the Bible. Okay? Christ never whirled in the Bible. So when you say you trust the Bible more than me, and the Bible's pointing to me, you're an idiot. The people who wrote in the Bible, if you take them at face value, again, if you take them at face value, and you believe that they're holy people, that they trust me more than they trust themselves. But if you look at it as a wise person, say, well, I don't know who wrote this Bible, and you see it for what it is some kind of trap, whether you believe God meant it to be there on purpose through righteous people, which is extremely doubtful. I don't believe that for a moment. Or you believe that it was wicked people being led astray by God, and God allowed it to be to test people, okay, then that's a little bit different, but it still doesn't change the bottom line that the idea that they're referring to, that they're trying to trap you with, is that you're supposed to, the idea that they're superimposing something else on while they're trying to trap you is that you're supposed to obey God through me.